Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Henry Stever, and I'm the President and CEO of AGB, the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges. Today's webinar is the final episode of a 6-part series called Bridging the Gap Between College Education and Workforce Readiness, created by a partnership among AAC&U, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, and Kaplan University Partners. Special thanks to Lynn Pascarella, the president of AAC&U, and Brandon Bustede, the chief partnership officer at Kaplan. For our participants today, please enter any questions in the chat feature, and we will work to address them as we progress. This series has been developed to address workforce readiness, a topic that research suggests is an opportunity for higher education. For example, one study discovered that only 35% of college graduates believe their studies prepared them for the workforce. And another study discovered that only 13% of US adults believe college graduates are prepared for the workforce. Very unfortunate findings, needless to say. To discuss the topic of today's webinar, scaling and institutionalizing work readiness in higher education, I am pleased to be joined by 5 exceptional leaders. Marla Capozzi is the former board chair at Babson College. Nina Henderson is the board vice chair at Drexel University. Scott Pulsifer is the president of Western Governors University. Clayton Spencer is the president of Bates College. And Blaine Tamaki is the Board of Regents vice chair for the University of Washington. Before we advance, I want to ensure our audience that we endorse the fiduciary role of boards to oversee the affairs of their colleges and universities and to serve as strategic thought partners to the president. At the same time, boards need to be mindful that they delegate operational responsibility to the president and therefore should avoid micromanaging and instead practice the acronym NIFO, N-I-F-O, noses in, fingers out. Further, we recognize that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to education. Each of our panelists' institutions define student success in ways in keeping with their unique missions. Each, as you will learn, also embraces its own approach to its role in creating student work readiness for sustainable life work. So here we go. Let's get into the conversation. So building on my introductory comments that each of your institutions defines success in many ways true to its mission, and that each has its own approach to creating student work readiness for sustainable life work, please briefly share in just a few short sentences how preparing students for work uniquely fits into your respective missions, and what is it that your institution does that you believe provides distinct value for your students. Let's start off with you, Marla, and I know you're the former board chair, so you can't say what you do, but when you were there, if you can share with us what you observed and what you tried to inspire.
Great, thank you, Henry, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. At Babson College, we are a business school. And so within that context, obviously workforce readiness is a top priority. And over the years, as we have moved from a business school to really focusing with a niche and becoming the #1 school in entrepreneurship, and now recently with a strong focus on entrepreneurial leadership, this is all about preparing the students to be able to lead as entrepreneurs and in an entrepreneurial way in all that they do. So it doesn't matter if you're in finance or marketing or doing a startup or joining a consulting firm, that preparing to lead and preparing to be agile and solve complex problems is a significant part of what we at Babson believe students need to be able to do.
Thank you, Marla. Let's turn to Nina, and after Nina, we'll go with Scott, Clayton, and Blaine.
Terrific. Thanks, Henry. Thanks, Marla. So Drexel University is over 135 years old, and from the beginning, it has been based on preparing its students to have a successful professional life and equally able to contribute civically. So that hasn't changed in the 135 years, and that is supported by rigorous academic experience, supported by cooperative education. In other words, working in your chosen career field during your matriculation. There's two reasons why that's great. It gives everybody a chance to see if that's really what they want to do, because we all know what we want to do changes through life and through your academic experience. And the second thing is you're paid while you're doing that. And third, you often are given a offer of employment. About half of our students who are their employers, like Shell and Exxon and Goldman Sachs, all sorts of different ones, offer employment to co-op students after they have finished their co-op periods. We're very heavily focused on the ability to allow the student, if they have decided after co-op that that particular field doesn't fit their needs or they change their mind, they still have time, of course, to matriculate differently. But having experiential learning is really important to us. Every student graduates with a resume. We have very high very high employment following their first year of graduation. Our students tend to earn about 23% above the national average upon graduation. They are ready for work in their fields. Now, we have a big medical school, the largest private medical school. Obviously, that's the height of experiential learning. We have a law school where we train all of our students. Moot court is something that happens in every law school, but that's very important at Drexel. We have even our people going into academic comprehensive research. We focus on translational research, use research. And by the second year, even undergraduate students can participate in laboratory science. So it's all about getting into your field while you're matriculating, Henry. So it's a model that's been very successful for our students for many years.
All right, thank you, Nina. Scott, if you could follow up, please. And by the way, for our audience, the reason we're starting with this perspective is, as I shared with you in the introduction, we've got 5 wonderfully experienced leaders, and each of their institutions is very unique. And I wanted to use this opportunity just to set the stage so you understand how diverse and uniquely valuable each of these institutions are. All right, Scott.
Thank you, Henry. It's great to be with all of you. For those of you who are unfamiliar with WGU, it was founded nearly 25 years ago by the governors of 19 Western states. They very purposely designed WGU as a private nonprofit institution of higher education to ensure that post-secondary pathways can in fact lead to opportunity, in particular in serving the many underserved communities and individuals that exist out there that are not served by traditional forms of education. And there are probably 2 underlying components to that are important. And the one is competency-based education. I'll come back to that. And then utilizing the internet to expand access in a way that we can reach and teach individuals where they are, rather than having them come to a classroom at a campus to receive the knowledge, skill, and ability they need to advance their lives. We do operate with a very singular purpose to reinvigorate the promise of education as the surest path to opportunity. And so when I come back to the competency-based education, one of the unique things that WGU does is that we ensure that the learning outcomes directly map to the competencies or those needs that exist in the workforce. And so we design all of our curriculum to ensure the readiness of our graduates so that they will find success in their professional pursuits, whatever they may be. That means that in a competency-based model, you as a student have to demonstrate proficiency in those competency areas, those learning outcomes, before you can progress from course to course. This is not a seat time model. And so we serve predominantly working learners from ages of 16 years old to 90 years old. But our average age tends to be in the mid-30s. We are focused on individuals who are seeking to pursue their first opportunity as well as advance their current professional pursuits. And so as they do so, what they're actually learning are skill sets, knowledge, capabilities that are going to be very relevant to the work that they pursue. such that when we do see the surveys from Harris and from Gallup and others, that in fact our graduates rate really highly that which they learned and acquired in terms of skills at WGU have directly prepared them for the work that they're pursuing. In addition to that, we see that our employers, 94% of our employers rate our graduates' skill sets or that their work as excellent or very satisfied in terms of their readiness for success, such that more than 98% of our employers are hiring WGU graduates again. In that regard, I would simply probably end with this, which is, as you might imagine, as we design for that curriculum, we have areas that are across business, across technology, across teacher education and health professions. Whereas today, with our online delivery model, we can reach and teach individuals wherever they are. We have students and graduates in each of our 50 states. We're the largest teachers college in the country, the largest nursing program in the country, and probably the fastest growing technology program in the country, where combined today, we serve over 130,000 full-time students and had 50,000 graduates in the last year alone. 95% of those graduates had full-time employment upon graduation and are achieving more than $22,000 in increase in annual income within 4 years of graduation, which is nearly twice the national average for graduates. And so I think that we started with embedding the workforce design and the work readiness into the curriculum itself.
All right, thank you, Scott. Clayton, you're up, and then Blaine, why don't you follow on her heels?
Terrific. So everything that Scott said, think the opposite of Bates College, which is a residential liberal arts college in Lewiston, Maine, has about 2,000 students and very much focused on traditional age students, what used to be called traditional age. Of course, they're no longer remotely the majority in higher education. But we serve students at a really important developmental moment as they progress from 18 to 22, or basically from families and childhoods to adulthood. And I would say it's probably fair to say that if you were doing a word association test and someone said liberal arts, you probably wouldn't shoot back work readiness. But we actually believe that the liberal arts is the most powerful and flexible lifelong set of tools you could have for work. And so when I arrived at Bates as president shortly after the Great Recession, I realized we needed to get away from a situation where you never talk about work and the Career Services Center is a marginal afterthought on the sort of outside rim of campus, and actually embrace preparing students for lives of purposeful work as a core concern of the liberal arts. Why do we do that? Because it is. If you think about it, the liberal arts are committed to taking a student, helping them discover through experiences in college and elsewhere what their strengths, interests, and values are, and then figure out what they do that will authentically match to those, how they will, what kind of work they will have, what kind of people they will seek out in their lives, and how they will have lives of contribution. So in a sense, we are creating agents of their own destiny. And it's kind of an Intel Inside model. So our notion of scale is not based on large numbers. It's based on the inherent portability of a sense of agency over your life and your choices. And everything we do in our purposeful work program is to design to bring to consciousness for those students to reflect on experiences, to seek out experiences, because you got to kick the tires to figure out, do you really want to be a farmer? We had one student who was convinced of that, and he came back and his post-internship presentation was, well, I've eliminated one profession that I will never, ever do in my entire life. So it's about reflection, consciousness, developing that in college, and then agency over your lifetime.
I'll go next. My name is Blaine Tamaki. Thank you, Henry, for inviting me to be a panelist today. It is an honor. I am the incoming chair of the University of Washington, and the University of Washington is a major public research university with 50,000 students, and we also run a major regional healthcare system. We are very fortunate to be second in the entire nation in total research grants at $1.6 billion, only slightly behind Johns Hopkins University on the East Coast. As a public research university, our clinical research is a huge part of our work readiness training of our graduates in their chosen field. I personally do not think public research universities are built to be most adept at producing job-ready graduates. Technical colleges, community colleges, and specialty colleges are designed from the ground up to create job-ready skills for specific jobs. But universities such as the UW are blessed with advantages because of our scale, our campuses, and state subsidized education. Whatever gap exists between job readiness and a UW degree can be closed through job experience. But our degrees do represent something invaluable. High achievement in academia, something that students and employers understand creates transferable skills in any work setting. UW is located in the city of Seattle. We are the headquarters for many of the new tech businesses such as Amazon, Microsoft, Expedia, Starbucks, T-Mobile, Alaska Airlines, Costco, and Boeing Manufacturing. We are the only major university located geographically in the entire Pacific Northwest region. So our STEM and business majors are usually able to find jobs fairly easily in our booming economy. Finally, we live in a blue state with a progressive governor who selects the board of regents, and therefore we have a progressive, diverse board, and quite naturally, we have hired a progressive president of our university. We therefore share a common vision of providing the resources necessary for our president to provide our graduates work readiness education. We are a decentralized university where our deans are given great independence, and therefore we rely on our deans of our schools to create our work readiness curriculum and training. Thank you, Henry. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Blaine, and thank you all for setting the stage. So as we move forward here, I want to kind of shift our conversation to the board president partnership. Clearly, some of you are on one side or the other, but as at AGB, as we celebrate our 100th anniversary of strengthening board governance, we believe that the board president partnership is critical to building a long-term favorable reputation for colleges and universities, while also fulfilling their missions to prepare students for life, just like you mentioned, Clayton. Please share your perspectives, and we're going to go around the horn on this one, but a little bit different order. But if you can share your perspectives on how, either from a board perspective in working with your president and team, or as a president in working with your board and team, have helped fulfill the promise of higher education as the path to opportunity. And I think that's what you had mentioned, Scott, the path to opportunity. And either have or are working to overcome potential barriers to achieving that very worthy goal. So let's start with you, Nina, and follow up with Scott.
Terrific. Thanks, Henry. So at Drexel, the board is very involved with the president, and in this case happens to be a man, his administration. And the strategic plan, for example, is of course developed by our management/administrative team, but there's a tremendous amount of input from the Board of Trustees. And in the development of the plan, as it proceeds, there's a lot of work together, so that all along the course, you have your Board of Trustees contributing, being a good advisor and a counselor, and then supporting when we get into the implementation stages. We also realize that strategic plans are living experiences and that you're never finished on those. So there's a lot of work at the board level with the president and his team. At the same time, the committee structure of the Board of Trustees at Drexel University is very, very, very active. And it starts with the core of the academic affairs, because that's what we're here for. We're an academic institution, and subsequently buildings and grounds and everything else are there to make sure that we produce high quality academic experience. And I happen to chair also the Academic Affairs Committee of the board. There are 12 trustees that sit on that. We work with the provost and the deans of the 13 colleges and 3 additional schools. We have very rigorous meetings on subjects that we all agree to the agenda 4 weeks before we have a meeting, so that everybody can input. It starts with the provost, of course. And there is a lot, and at every session, we have an ability to meet at least one dean of one college just to update us, and then many other initiatives and so on. So I would say we've got a very collaborative activity between the management and ministerial group and our board of trustees. And our board of trustees are really involved with the university. And during COVID, I don't know how the rest of you, we had many more meetings than normal at the president's request. And it really, I think, engaged our board of trustees and our administrative and management group in a really productive way and helped our students. So that's a quick overview.
Thanks, Nita. I appreciate it. Sounds like you exercise what I talked about before around NIFO. Lots of noses in and few fingers in.
Yeah,
few
exactly.
fingers, and most of your fingers out, rather.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have anybody, no one is shy. And they don't, a lot of us happen to come out of the business environment. Some come out of academia. It's all very broad board of trustees, but our deans and everybody, they don't mind if we use business terminology, because they know we're here to support them, to make sure that we can provide the best education, some of which doesn't always, we teach things that don't turn margin, for example. That's quite all right. It's part of, as Clayton was saying, the learning experience. So
Great. Okay, Scott, you're up, and then followed by Clayton.
Well, it's certainly interesting to hear Nina's perspective there, because I think the audience will learn pretty quickly that board structure and board engagement, it tends to be pretty unique to the institution they're serving, because what Nina described would be incredibly overweight for WGU. It would probably never fly with management. Speaking from my own perspective, is that it sounds a little more involved than I think we'd be comfortable with. But that being said, I think the board has been incredibly important for fundamentally establishing the mission, the vision, and the strategy for the institution. I would say that they are fiduciaries in the sense that they are responding and advising and counseling on that which I, as the chief executive, and management presents as that mission, vision, and the priorities that we're going to pursue in the fulfillment of that vision. And so just to give you an example of that, is like, it is core to ensuring the board's core purpose is to ensure that we, in our priorities and our execution, are fulfilling the mission that we set about to achieve. And that really is about expanding access to high quality education and optimizing outcomes. The other key thing about our mission is to ensure that in all of our priorities, that we are putting the student at the center of everything that we do. I'm certainly grateful that we don't have a campus, and that we don't have buildings, and we don't have many ancillary adjunct operational responsibilities that many of these institutions do. Many of those we would see as superfluous when it comes to actually the student that we focus on. Now, to give you kind of a near-term example of how the board has been very engaged on this, is just in the past year, the board approved the revision to our mission statement. We had a pretty descriptive mission statement before that was almost paragraph in length, and we wanted to make that very simple, to make it very clear as to why we exist. And that mission statement was updated to simply be that we change the lives for the better by creating pathways to opportunity. It's that simple. We view the promise of education as the surest path to opportunity. And so we focus also on key results of completion, return for graduates, and equity in both access and attainment. The board was critical in a months-long, year-long review of revisions and discussions about what that mission statement would mean. The other key points that the board has to be engaged at any institution is what is the vision that then are going to dictate the priorities and strategy for the institution going forward. That has been an interesting and long conversation in my time and tenure here at WGU, because if the first 25 years, if you will, were about reinventing an institution of higher education for the ground up, we contemplated what the next phase was. And we pretty settled on this fact that if having reinvented the institution of higher education, we need to actually endeavor to catalyze the transformations, the system of higher education as a whole. There are many innovations that we believe that we can be the catalyst for to bring more student-centered and obsessive work to ensure that education works for everyone and not just the privileged. And so this is just examples I bring up as the way the board and their fiduciary responsibilities ensures that management is executing the strategy to fulfill the mission of the institution. And they obviously do so from a budgetary standpoint, but really it comes down to mission, vision, and strategic priorities. And then it's management's job to execute that well. And so we're grateful for that balance of duty.
Thanks, Scott. Clayton, your thoughts, and then Blaine.
Sure. Let me start with just briefly, our board is overwhelmingly alumni, parents, and a couple of other people. It's a hardworking board, and it has been one of the deep joys of my time as president, which is I'm entering my 10th year, is that there's been tremendous alignment between the board's ambition for Bates and how they see it and where they want to see it going, and my own. And that alignment is key to moving a college forward successfully. And it's certainly key to the sense of well-being of the president and the team running the college. I would say that when I centered in my inauguration speech that preparing students for work was a core concern of the liberal arts, parents and board members just intuitively started doing backflips, because that doesn't typically happen at a liberal arts college. But then I was very careful as we designed the program to locate that statement in the deep purposes of the liberal arts and in a distinctive aspect of what Bates is about. We were founded in the mid-19th century, 1855 Civil War era, by abolitionists who were also free will Baptists, who thought that everybody deserved an opportunity, to Scott's point. So Bates is one of the first private coeducational colleges in the United States. We admitted African-American students from the mid-19th century. And that's an important part of who we are. I should do an aside here and say we are having the same struggles everybody is with the kind of structural inequities in our society, and that continues to this day. So we're not immune from those. But one of the ways that they were interested in purposeful work is to that equity mission. I said, you know, we've all figured out how to get students in to Bates from a wide range of backgrounds by funding them well with financial aid. We figured out how to support them for success, but they don't have the networks that some of our other students do. So if you are not running an excellent professionalized team, in our case, the Center for Purposeful Work, you're going to have certain groups of students systematically underperforming the value of their degree. So I've called purposeful work the third leg of our equity promise. So access, support for academic success, and then a bridge to a meaningful, purposeful, successful life and work. So the next thing I would say is the board is, to Scott's point about boards being fiduciaries, they're paid to have the long view. So purposeful work, the program and the philosophy of it locates what's happening on campus with these 18 to 22-year-olds in a life's journey and in a collective notion of economic success, you know, professional success. It doesn't have to be economic. And so the board is paid to have that long-term perspective, or they're all volunteers, I should be clear. But they also, the idea that we were taking that long-term perspective, we were embracing the values. So purposeful work, intuitively, I think for parents and the board, stands as a proxy for the value proposition of the liberal arts. And it needs we need to have a good story about that and a story that's true, because these are very expensive educations. We have very generous financial aid, but you have to justify that investment for families.
All right, thank you, Clayton. I'm going to come back to some of your topics in a bit here, but I first want to get to Blaine and then Marla. Blaine, you're on mute, sir.
Thank you, Henry. I give credit to our students at the University of Washington who have dictated the need for a UW degree to provide an avenue to employment. One of the biggest changes and challenges for our university is the influx of students choosing STEM as their choice of major. Our student census for STEM majors have nearly doubled since I've been a regent. In my opinion, this is a direct result of students shouting at the board and our central administration that they want jobs after they graduate with a degree. The fact today is that STEM degrees yield the highest paying jobs and are the most available jobs in the city of Seattle. And as you all know, STEM education stresses the financial budget because it's more expensive to teach and train STEM graduates than liberal art graduates. Because of this high demand, the UW initially struggled with too many students being denied admission to our STEM schools, and we forced them to choose alternative majors. Other students were simply denied spots in our STEM classes, resulting in major disappointment with their UW experience. In response, we changed our admission policy to directly admit students directly into the STEM majors from high school. This has helped a great deal. For our liberal arts graduates, we are now moving to adding data science minors as an option to supplement their major. We've all recognized that every job today, regardless of your major, requires computer skills and training. This addition to our graduation standards simply recognizes the need for graduates to be work ready when graduating. Another challenge for the University of Washington, is the intense competition from the online specialty colleges like WGU and ASU in the Pac-12. The UW is lucky because our admission rate has remained strong and we have a lot of applicants to our university. But these new colleges and new approaches are potential disruptors to our business model. Whether we like it or not, the UW was forced to go totally online last spring. We were the first in the nation to totally switch to online education because the pandemic hit Seattle first. We were forced to rapidly adapt, and now we are adapting to the selected benefits of online environment in response to student and faculty preferences. So finally, how does the board help the president in this changing environment? Well, from the board's perspective, it's all about the budget, whether we like it or not. No margin, no mission. From the time that our regent board has met, we recognize that it is essential to have the budget necessary to equip the president with the resources to develop work readiness training for our graduates. So this is how we work with the president, primarily relying on our focus on the budget, We have created many different new taxes in the state of Washington to reverse the trend of state subsidy decline for higher education in our state, which is one of the first reversals of these trends in the entire nation. And we are proud of that. So this is how we approach the work readiness issue.
Great, thanks so much, Blaine. Marla, wrap us up here on this section, and then we're going to get into a discussion on inclusivity and equity, et cetera.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. I think instead of talking specifically about Babson, I think what I might like to do is share some of, in the spirit of the role of the board versus the role of management, some of the things that are incredibly helpful and where we have seen and I have seen the greatest value. And one of those is just asking the right questions and asking more questions. So if, it's about workplace readiness or any other topic, one of the main things the board needs to do is really just ask the right questions and ask those provocative questions. I think the second piece is to really ask for the data, because you can talk about workplace readiness, we can talk about any other issue, but if the board and the administration have a different understanding of the common ground and the data, then progress is going to be very, very difficult to make. So the right questions, the right data, and making sure that there's an understanding of that right data. And this is one of those places where there is data. Where are students going? What are other colleges doing? Making sure that there's benchmarking and learning from those other institutions as well. And then also just whether or not this is a priority in the strategic plan. Nina talked about, how they are doing it there. That has to be an agreement, is where does this fit in the strategic plan? And then lastly, where is the investment going to come? What is the expectation in terms of the execution of that plan, the execution at scale, and what resources are needed to get there? And do other things need to be deprioritized or resources reallocated or funding raised to do some of these things? And so it's a little bit of the same process that you would say a board would go through for any topic. But I think this one in particular, there is data, there is benchmarking, there's a lot of creative ideas as evidenced by this panel that I think we can all learn from.
Great, thanks so much. I'm going to come back to you, Marla, and Clayton and Scott in a bit here, but I want to make sure, because we're running a little short on time here, and I want to make sure we get into an important topic here. So I just posted in the chat a new resource that AGB published back in April. So I call April kind of relevant, or recent rather. It's the AGB Board of Directors Statement on Justice, Equity, and Inclusion. And that's based on an initiative that we launched 2 years ago. So it was before all of the social challenges that we encountered in the country last year. It was basically our Justice, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion initiative. And that's really focused on the premise that students will be entering a world of work that is more diverse than ever in the past. You've read some of the census findings recently that were published, and more unhesitatingly more global as well. Further, as you probably have read, earlier this year, the Gates Foundation's Post-Secondary Value Commission suggested that higher education sometimes has exacerbated economic inequality rather than alleviate it. And while student populations have diversified over the last few decades, board composition, senior leadership, and faculty, broadly speaking, have not kept pace with the diversification of their student bodies. So my question is really for all of you, we'll start with Scott, is to understand how your institution and board and yourself in your role, whether you're a president or a board member, how your institution has diversified its board, its senior leadership team, the faculty over time. And the reason I ask those three parts is because in the statement that I just published, or posted into the chat, if you summarize 40 pages of content, there's three key strategies. One is to apply an equity lens to your board's policies, practices, and priorities. Number two is develop and apply an equity lens across campus. And number three is to develop and apply an equity lens within your communities. So it really kind of gets to Carla's question in the chat around preparing students and making sure that equality is available for all students, not just for some. So Scott, why don't we start with you and talk about how you've been able to diversify your team, your board to align with your students?
Yeah, this is probably a topic by itself that could take a whole hour and a panel.
I know, so try to keep it short, Scott.
We'll try to be brief. Maybe one thing I will say is that we do everything, as I said, starting with the student, we work backwards from there, meaning that we are trying to solve for education as a pathway opportunity and one that works for everyone, not just the privileged. Many of the audience members probably know the last 50 years of higher education outcome data. It doesn't look great for those if you're not in the top income quartile of households. And it gets worse when you look at intersectionality with race, ethnicity, and low income. And so we, first and foremost, as I mentioned, we have three key results: completion, return for graduates, and equity in access and attainment. So we are very specifically trying to ensure that we continue to fulfill our mission by expanding access among the underserved communities. Today, over 70% of our individuals are from underserved backgrounds, whether it's low-income households, military populations, rural, ethnic and racial minorities, et cetera. And so one of the key things, though, we're focused on is to ensure that our enrollment overall matches that which we see in the communities that we're serving. And so we are trying to ensure that any gap that we have in our enrollment, particularly among Black and African American, as well as Hispanic, Latino, Latina communities, as well as Indigenous individuals, that we align with the Gates Commission and their focus on that ethnic equity, the racial and ethnic equity. And so we're trying to make sure that within 5 years, we've closed any gaps that we have in access. The other key thing that we're focused on is over 10 years, we're trying to eliminate the disparity in outcomes in completion rates among those that may be from low income backgrounds, as well as from underrepresented populations. Again, those same ones that we align with Gates. Now, as an input to that, we have to ensure that our population of employees and our faculty, et cetera, represent the communities that we serve. And the same we'd like to do within our own board. But I'd probably put it in that order, that we're trying to ensure that our management itself, and particularly our faculty, represent the students and the populations that we serve. And in this regard, is like we have made a very concerted effort to ensure that our candidate population for all the hiring that we're doing, mind you, we're hiring net over the last 5 years, we probably added about 800 to 1,000 net new employees every year, 60+% of which are faculty members. And so we're trying to ensure that our candidate population is reflecting the population and the diversity that comprises it. And we've done a really good job hiring in that, particularly at more senior levels. Just by last point to note here too, is that more than half of all of our senior executives and our leaders are women. We have about 28% of our population in total are from underrepresented populations, so represent diverse communities and individuals. And so we're trying to make sure that that also reflects that too. Where we really focus is how do we ensure that we're tapping into those talent populations of the individuals that should reflect the diversity of the students that we serve. And so we'll be seeing the same impact. We have a much smaller board than Drexel or that some of our peers may have. We only have a 13-member board, and that includes me. And so, we're really working with a pretty small board, but our intent is to ensure that about, 1/3 to 40% of that are from diverse backgrounds, and at least it's a half-half makeup between genders. And so that we'll see realized over the next 3 to 5 years.
All right, thank you so much, Scott. I appreciate it. Let's try to go kind of rapid fire through here. It's a huge topic. I realize that, Scott, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And that's why that report that I just sent everyone, it's 40, 50 pages. And I tried to summarize it into those 3 key strategies. Anyway, Clayton, what are your thoughts on this topic, on how you're trying to align your students with a diverse world, as well as to eliminate equity barriers?
Sure. So for a small liberal arts college at our price point, the first thing you have to do is get students through the door through generous financial aid. Then you have to make sure that you massively support all students for success. And students come from very different sort of journeys of preparation and opportunities for academic preparation. They do not come from different talent levels. I feel that our offer of admission to any student is a vote of confidence that they will benefit from this education and can succeed. So we're very proud of the fact that we have a very high graduation rate, a completion rate for all students, usually in the 90%, 90 to 92%. But our graduation rate for Pell students is even higher. And that is very unusual. We're very proud of that. Our issue is we need to keep raising money to make sure that we can follow the talent and the demographics in this country to make sure that a liberal arts education stays available. In faculty, I think the most creative thing that we have done, and it's been very effective, we use a lot of the strategies that Scott was talking about in terms of active and inclusive searches. It's building the pool and meaning it. It's not, let's make sure we've got a diverse candidate in the finalist group invited to campus. And we start building the pool sometimes 2 to 3 years in advance through having series on our campus where we invite faculty in from across the country in different disciplines for an emerging scholars series. So we get to know faculty members who are getting excellent training, et cetera. And then on the board, I would say one of the most important things we've done is in order to increase our the diversity of the board, but also the consciousness of the board to use that equity lens, which is how we think about it too, Henry, to your point, is to say if we have a connection with a strong person of color, we have an amazing historian of science. She's chair of the History of Science department at Harvard. She was the first African-American dean of Harvard College. And I knew her as a colleague there, and I just called her up and I said, would you be willing to serve on our board? And she said, I would, actually. And so just get a little more creative. If that's a priority, make it happen. So those are just 3 examples.
Fantastic. Blaine?
Yes, the lens that you were referring to, Henry, I think our board created this lens through the creation of a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of the board. It is an extremely powerful committee of the Regent Board. The president of our university attends each and every meeting of the DEI committee. Our Board of Regents is diverse. We have 2 Blacks, 1 Asian, 1 Latino. 4/9 of our board is racially diverse. Our president is a Latina, and she's also LGBTQ. Our chancellors of our 2 other branch campuses are women. Nearly 25% of our total student body at the University of Washington are Asian by heritage. The DEI committee tracks all of the UW expenditures to minority and women-owned businesses in the state. We have been able to dramatically increase our spending of our $8.8 billion budget to benefit directly the diverse businesses in our state. As I've said before, we are progressive, and that mindset keeps us diverse-minded in all aspects. But let me not fool you, we still have a long way to go.
Henry.
Sorry about that. All right. I hope it didn't cut out on you. But anyway, thanks, Blaine. Marla?
I guess I'll just say,
whether it's from Babson or in general, just a few thoughts.
I think that all of us, certainly in my role at McKinsey with my clients at Babson, this is a journey that we are all on, and we have a lot to learn. And I think we have to continue with eyes wide open, and with the fact that we really need to learn a lot from a lot of people as we go through this journey. I think at Babson in particular, I'm proud I was the first woman to chair the board. The next chair that I just passed on to is our first Black chair of the board. I set up a DEI committee at the board level a couple years ago, which was the first one that we've had, and they have worked tirelessly to help all of us learn, educate, integrate all of the efforts, and figure out how all of this comes together, because the power of this is when it all comes together, not just having a series of 20 silos happening all around the campus. And so I think I would just, say that making it a priority, and the president has made it one of his top 3 priorities. And, but again, there's just, there's so much to learn from all of us, and so much to try out, and so many ways to get better.
All right, thanks so much. Nina, wrap us up on this topic, please.
Sure. I think a lot of the points that my colleagues have made are similar at Drexel. I love, Marla, the comment of a journey. That's what this is. If you stop at any point in time, you're defeating the purpose. I would say that Drexel has an interesting situation here. From its founding, the idea behind Anthony J. Drexel's endowing the school was the whole point that the first time people going to college would have a chance. Still today, many of our undergraduates who first come in their first year are the first in their families to go to college. So it's very important. Our heritage for the Drexel College of Medicine, which is the largest private medical school in the country, it includes the Women's College of Pennsylvania in 1851, the first medical school to admit women. We have the current dean of our engineering school, our engineering college, Drexel's very famous for that, is a woman. We have a huge Asian contingency here because we have a lot of STEM. And so we have a large group of academicians who are of Asian background. We're Center City, Philadelphia. We have a lot of Pell students, very high levels of those on purpose. We also are one of the owners of St. Christopher's Children's Hospital. It is I'm sorry to say this, the largest Medicaid payor situation for children. It's one of 12 freestanding children's hospital in the United States. So our whole experience is diversity. Are we where we'd like to be? No, we want our leadership, our board, our administration to mirror our students. I think Scott is right. If you're not, there and they can't see themselves, you have a serious problem. So we're continually working on that. We have an executive council that works with the president. Of those members of that council, it's academicians, it's administrators, it's everything, not board. We have over 23% of those people are of diversity backgrounds, including LGBTQ, everything. Like everybody, we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion focus. We have affinity groups across. We are encouraging the affinity groups to mingle because you need to learn how to look through other people's eyes. So I think, I think it's a combination of what we're all doing, but it's that important part, never stop.
Great. Thanks so much, Nita. I'm going to turn to the Q&A section as we've got about 10 minutes or so left, a little less than 10. First question is actually for you, Clayton. Here's what it says. I don't know if you see it in the Q&A yourself.
Yeah.
To your point regarding the network gap, what strategies exist and what tactics are used to close the social capital gap so that traditionally underserved graduating students are better situated to enter the job market on more equal footing?
Yeah. So let me say, I think of this as which students had the chance to grow up around a dinner table with college educated parents who are in the professions, and they just were marinating their whole lives in a set of norms, exposure to different kinds of discussion, et cetera. So what can we do to try to make sure that all students have the ability to figure out what they want to do, not just do the only things they've ever been exposed to, figure out what they want to do, and then have enough exposure to pressure test it. So every student, when they go, purposeful work begins when you first get there. It doesn't begin all, it's not, you got to go out and get an internship the next day, but it's how do you know yourself, your skills, your interests? There are, you can take scans for that, like skill scan or whatever. We do job shadows where you can do we have core employers at Bates, which is a group of employers who work with us on internships and job shadows. If you want to see what it means to work in a Wall Street bank, go look for 3 days. And our students get to do that. We do road shows. If you've thought you were interested in politics, do our road show in Washington. And then one of the most important things is the not very glamorous things. If kids are getting ready for interviews, give them mock interviews and help them be able to articulate how this education they're getting relates, why they think they're interested, and how what they're learning is going to relate to their success. And finally, our internships, we take a cohort-based approach in purposeful work. So if you're a purposeful work intern, you're either funded by the employer or by Bates through fundraising. And all summer, you'll get a prompt. What was the most surprising thing that happened to you this week? Send in a picture that just captures your experience so far this summer. So they're constantly linked to the mothership and they're linked to each other. And when they come back in the fall, every student is required to give a presentation. And we all go, they're really fun. The students give them. And the point is you want to bring to consciousness and have the reflection happening so that students can articulate and be confident candidates and effective candidates as they go through this. So those are just some of the very basic strategies, but you have to really have a commitment to execution, and that's part of what we do.
All right. I'm going to turn to kind of a wrap up here. Well, maybe it's a full wrap up or maybe it's a semi wrap up, but Ned Laff asked a really great question. And I've heard this a lot from my kids, and I've got 5 kids who are all through college, thank goodness, and off the payroll. But his question goes like this: the majority of students find their employment in the hidden job market. So I'm going to ask each of you in 32 seconds or less, your perspectives, again, whether it's with your institution or generally with how you've seen it, how you help students or others look at the relationship between hidden intellectualism, the nature of college learning, and the hidden job market. Really interesting question. Thank you, Ned. So let's start with you, Marla. How do you find opportunities in this hidden market?
Hidden meaning just like through networking
posted.
versus.
It's not posted. It's, how do you go find opportunities that may exist? You answered the way I was going to start answering around networking, but go for it.
Well, I mean, I think it's, for me, it's a bit challenging because there is no hidden job network at McKinsey or any of the consulting firms. It's flat out the website, completely transparent. So, but I do think that, probably that networking piece of it, but it's not just networking. I think that there's a real opportunity to help students learn how to network better in the form of reciprocity, in the form of co-creation. What can we create together? If there's a hidden market, then it's usually because Nina and I came together and created a job opportunity for me through our problem solving, through a problem that she had in her institution or her company. And so I think there's some, the best way to do it, honestly, is to really help the students be better at networking. And what does that actually mean? It does not mean sending an email and saying, hi, I'd like to learn about your trajectory at McKinsey. Well, I joined 21 years ago. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. And it's not even the same process. So I don't know how to even begin that conversation. Right? And so the only way to get at that is to teach them how to better do it.
Good. Scott, your thoughts on that? How do you penetrate that opportunity with your 50,000 graduates a year? I think you said that was a number earlier.
Yeah, I think a large part of it is, one, I don't believe there is actually a hidden job market, meaning that I think what was being referenced is that how do you actually add to the networking, the access, et cetera, so that individuals who don't have that access through the relationships are actually getting that access. And this can be one of the huge issues for equity, particularly as a pathway. I will say that we do expand significantly our partnerships with employers, with community colleges, and now we have a 250,000 and rapidly growing alumni network that are employed at all these organizations too. But at the end of the day, I will say this, which is individuals still won't hire someone who isn't competent in the job, skills they need, even if those skills are human skills, so I will just articulate that point, which is even those things that make us uniquely human, the ability to problem solve, reason, interpersonal dynamics, communication, both written and oral, like those are also competencies. And I think part of the networking capability, you're actually developing or applying those competencies in a way that is in fact meaningful to your preparedness for the job that you may get as a result. And so we do leverage heavily 250 plus employer partnerships across the US, our 250,000 alumni to try to break down some of those access barriers to the job itself. And ultimately, we're trying to ensure that we're articulating the competencies that our graduates have in the skills that are needed for the jobs that are being posted.
All right, so we'll call that the semifinal wrap up. So I'm going to get to the final close here. Clayton and then Blaine and then Nina, literally in 30 seconds or less. What has been your single most important learning from either your life or working with your institution that can help break down barriers and help students achieve work readiness?
To have a coherent philosophy of what you're doing and excellent design, spend time in design, and an airtight commitment to execution. Those
Beautiful,
three.
beautiful. Blaine?
I mentioned this before. I think that high achievement in academia can provide the transferable skills to any job. And I think the traditional model of public universities is not broken, and that our graduates are job ready just through the attainment of a degree.
All right, Nina. Thank you, Blaine. Nina, you're up last year.
Thanks. Be outward facing. If you become myopic, you're dead on arrival. So constantly understand what's going on in your marketplace and outside. And second, keep your finger on the pulse. If you don't know among your constituency, which is quite broad, what they're thinking, how they're reacting, that's students, that's employers, and we could go on with the list. So those two things, be outward facing and keep your finger on the pulse.
All right. Well, in the spirit of keep our finger on the pulse, time is up. I want to thank all of our participants for joining us today. I think we had somewhere around 500 people register for this webinar. And I also want to thank Marla, Nina, Scott, Clayton, and Blaine for your time. I know you have incredibly busy days. Everyone has busy days. Thank you all for your time, and contact me with any questions or any of us. Have a great day.
Thank you, Henry.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.